Okay, Oedipus the king. When you remember, it will actually really help if you read the introductions to each author. I mean, you have the three period introductions, and but it also really helps to get a feel for things and sort of make some connections if you read the introductions. All right, with the in the beginning of Oedipus the king, you're in ancient Thebes. I mean, most Athenian tragedy is not set in Athens; it's set in a kind of mythic setting. And you have two primary cities in Oedipus the king: Thebes, where the action takes place, and Corinth, where Oedipus originally came from and where a messenger eventually comes from. There's now let's just make sure we're, you can Google the plot of Oedipus and do whatever, just you want a sense of the backstory, what the story is chronologically. And the story is, chronologically, that you have prophecies and the attempt to evade prophecies. And in the early going, at the birth of Oedipus, he is taken out to be exposed on a hillside to evade on Mount Cithron to evade a prophecy that he will kill his father. But the shepherd who is supposed to take him out and leave him gives him to another shepherd from Corinth. So Oedipus ended up leaving Thebes with his parents, Jocasta and Laius, the king and queen, going and being raised in Corinth, and only hearing by rumor, speculation, that he was not really the son of his Corinthian parents, the king and queen of Corinth. But he eventually comes up with another prophecy, again from Apollo at Delphi, that he will kill his father and marry his mother. So he flees that prophecy. On the way, ends up killing King Laius, his actual biological father, at the crossroads, and then coming to Thebes, answering the riddle of the Sphinx. And the Sphinx is the monster that threatens to destroy the city, the body of the lion, the head of a woman. And he solves that riddle, saves Thebes, and becomes their king. And conveniently, their king Laius has just died. Of course, Oedipus is the one who killed him, but he didn't know that. And there's so when the action begins, you have a plague coming in Thebes, just like that must sound familiar from the Iliad, and a plague of Apollo on the city of Thebes. And so you have all of these things. And if you look at the kind of things, Thebes is dying on line 31. A blight on the fresh crops, cattle sicken and die, the women die in labor, children stillborn, right? All those things. I mean, all of which in some ways involve fertility. But there's a corruption at the heart of the house, at the heart of fertility and the process of birth, conception and birth. And that corruption is obviously that Oedipus has fulfilled the prophecy. He has married his mother Jocasta, he has killed his father Laius, and he has conceived children with Jocasta. And we see those children at the end of the play being led away into disgrace, taken care of by Creon, who is Jocasta's brother, but still disgrace. All right, when the play opens, and remember, the irony of the play, which is really pervasive in tragedy, because all the Athenian audience, they know the ancient myths, they know the stories, so they know what Oedipus has done, who Oedipus is, what this house is in Thebes. They know how monstrous and terrifying it all is. So when they're hearing Oedipus's words, they're not learning anything from them. What they're hearing is what he doesn't know that they already know, right? And which is one primary kind of irony, dramatic irony. So when you hear that, try to hear it with Athenian ears. I mean, they know what's coming and they can't stop it. It has to be played out to its end. So Oedipus greets them, and he comes out from the building in the back toward the orchestra, where the chorus is moving around, and the priest is kind of the spokesman for the chorus. And the chorus is going to, again, represent the polis. When they move, we move. When they fear, we fear. When they rejoice, we rejoice, right? So he comes out and he says, "Oh, my children, the new blood of ancient thieves, why are you here, huddling at my altar, praying before me? Our city reeks with the smoke of burning incense, rings with cries for the healer and waiting for the dead. I thought it wrong, my children, to hear the truth from others. Here I am myself. You all know me. The world knows my fame. I am Oedipus." And that is our starting point. I am Oedipus. I mean, the confidence in his rational power, in his own identity, which is precisely what's going to fall apart. The one who could save Thebes strictly by his intelligence, by his competence, by his confidence, will not be able to save himself. And that's where you're going to go from I am Oedipus here to I am agony later. And then returning to I am Oedipus, but in light of that tragic knowledge. All right. And then he'll say things like, "I would be blind to misery, not to pity my people kneeling at my feet." And that thing of blindness in sight, of course, runs throughout. Tiresias, the blind prophet that he's going to summon, is blind but can see. Oedipus can see but is blind. But what's important is what he's blind to. His own faults, his own fallibility, his own mortality. He's blind to his own condition. That's primarily what he's blind to, as we all are. So the priest goes on to beg him to act, to lift up the city, to save him as he once saved him from the Sphinx. And Oedipus responds again, "My children," this is on 6:14. "I see, how could I fail to see what longings bring you here? I know you are sick to death, all of you, but sick as you are, not one is sick as I," right? And over and over, these words that the audience hears, and they know what this really means. You don't know how sick you are. And it's, then Creon, Jocasta's brother, who is also, there's always a little tension because Creon is part of the royal house. This outsider Oedipus has come in and, claimed the throne. And Creon seems to be happy with that. But if Oedipus sometimes shows signs of distrusting Creon, there's a reason. It's a political struggle. So he comes on, and Creon has just returned from Delphi to hear what Apollo has to say about why the plague is there and what they can do to lift it. And he wants, initially, at the bottom of 6:14, "If you want my report in the presence of these, ... meaning let's go inside and talk about it." And why does he want to go inside? And actually, that's one thing. If you want to make a comment about that, that's a good thing. Because at each point, what could Oedipus have done differently? Does he have to do the things he does? Yes, he's not responsible for the whole situation of his birth, everything else, but especially within the action of the play, what could he do differently? And Creon is giving him one clear sense of one thing right up front. If you want to hear the words of the oracle, let's go inside the palace and talk about it. All right. There is so he says this. Apollo commands us, drive the corruption from the land. So they have to figure out what that is. And Creon says, our Lord was once a lord named Laius. Laius was the king who was murdered, they think, by robbers at the crossroads. And they have to find his murderer. So there's on 6:16, 6:17, you get a few things. One is Oedipus says, "No, I'll start again. I'll bring it all to light myself." Right? "Whoever had killed the king may decide to kill me too with the same violent hand. By avenging Laius, I defend myself." How wrong he is, right? Then you have the first choral ode. In tragedies, the odes are those formal, long choral songs. There's 5 of them. And the action that takes place around it with all the dialogue and the actors, those are the episodes. That's where our word episode comes from. So you have odes, episodes. But if you look at the movement of the choral songs, you can trace the movement of the play through the reaction of the chorus. The first one is just fear. "I worship you in dread," right? All the death, everybody's dying. "Thebes is dying. Look, her children stripped with pity. Drive him back, the fever, the god of death, that raging god of war." so on and so forth. This plea, it's just plea, fear, terror. Then Oedipus responds on 618, line 245. You pray to the gods, let me grant your prayers. You pray to the gods, let me grant your prayers. Okay, that almost needs no commentary, right? There's Oedipus is a good king, is a competent man, far above the average and much better than the ancient standards for kingship. But he has a serious blind spot, and certain things are kind of out of whack. There is now he goes on 619. He says, he tells them, no one will harbor him. Never let holy water touch his hands, the murderer. Drive him out, each of you, from every home. He is the plague. Then 280. Now my curse on the murderer, whoever he is, a lone man unknown in his crime or one among many. Let that man drag out his life in agony, step by painful step. I curse myself as well, if by any chance he proves to be an enemy of our house. Now, when he's doing this, the audience is shrinking in terror because they know what he's doing. He's calling this down on himself. Now, here's another question. Does he have to do it in the form of a curse? Yes, he has to try to do what the oracle says. Does he have to do this? If not, what might he have done instead? What short of that could he have done? What would have been the wiser, more prudent course of action? So, if you have any thoughts on that, that would be interesting. Now, on Tiresias comes on 620, 621, and Oedipus greets him, the greatest of prophets, the same guy who's in the center of the Odyssey, the one that Odysseus has to go to the underworld to see, right? That Tiresias. He sees Tiresias, and he greets him, and he says, O Tiresias, master of all the mysteries of our life, all you teach and dare not tell, right? You are the one shield, the one savior we can find. That's how he starts. By the end, he's going to be calling him a lying dog, and on and on, right? Meaning, and mocking his whole pretense to prophecy when he doesn't like what Tiresias tells him. All right, there is and 621. Tiresias begins hesitantly. How terrible to see the truth when the truth is only pain to him who sees. I knew it well, but I put it from my mind, else I would never have come. Right? He doesn't want to speak what he knows. Then Tiresias is going to, Oedipus is going to start getting mad. You scum of the earth, you enrage a heart of stone. You won't talk? Out with it once and for all. Then Tiresias begins to tell him. On 400, he tells him straight out. You are the curse, the corruption in the land. And then he goes on to make it even plainer. You are the murderer you seek. End of story. There's the answer. So why doesn't Oedipus hear it? And the reason is fairly simple. He thinks there's a plot. That Tiresias and Creon are in bed, not literally, they're in bed, and they're out to destroy him with his main political competition in the royal house and the main religious authority, Tiresias, the greatest prophet. That these two are in league to sort of spin an oracle in such a way that it means the end of Oedipus and his deposition as king. So now, if you think about it, that's not always, that's not that far-fetched. That it's, in political terms, right? Politics is brutal, especially when a royal house is at stake. So another interesting thing is he's going to do this with when he's going to go on to when he's going to go on. Actually, let's look before the choral song on Tiresias' final thing on 624, 625. I'll never shrink from the anger in your eyes. You can't destroy me. This is line 510. Look to me, listen to me closely. The man you sought so long, proclaiming, cursing up and down the murder of Laius, he is here. And then revealed at last, brother and father both, to the children he embraces, to his mother's son and husband both. He sowed the loins his father sowed. He spilled his father's blood. Go in and reflect on that. Solve that. If you find I've lied, from this day onward, call the prophet blind. And Tiresias and the boy he was guiding the blind prophet exit. And then the chorus freaks out and says, "Who is the man, the voice the God denounces? The horror too dark to tell." Right? And it's the dark winds beating around him, shrieking doom. I can't accept him, can't deny him, don't know what to say. I'm lost in the wings of dark foreboding beating. That's all in the choral chant. And and within that ode, the terror comes specifically from this division that is split between the religious authority, Tiresias, and the political authority. That the people don't know where to turn. They want the authorities unified. And so they're torn between two contending forces. And it's going to get worse because Oedipus is going to accuse Creon. So you have, a split in all directions. And the people start to panic, like a crowd of panicked cattle. There is, now, 626, 627, Oedipus denounces Creon. You have the gall to show your face before the palace gates, you plotting to kill me, scheming to steal my crown and power, right? Now the interesting thing, Creon actually handles it fairly well. He knows that Oedipus is overreacting, that he's acting the wrong way, and he warns Oedipus of the danger of becoming a tyrant, to rule simply by force, by strength. And Oedipus is in the force of his reaction for a very good end. He wants to save Thebes, is in danger of becoming that. The interesting thing is in a later play, Antigone. We're not reading Antigone, but it's the next play in here. Antigone is the daughter of Oedipus, and Creon is the king in that play. And this is, and you see Creon becoming a tyrant, meaning not, missing the things he knew so well in Oedipus the king. All right. Now, an interesting thing, when you have these things about plots, the conspiracy, and until Jocasta comes on board and simmers them both down, her brother and her husband/son. She doesn't know it's her son, but she tries to simmer everybody down, get everybody inside, let's just deal with this. Now, one thing that's interesting is conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories tend to be really complicated, meaning it's like 9/11 truther sites, right? That we blew up the World Trade Center, or some other group did. And that it's that conspiracy theories tend to be really insanely elaborate, thoroughly documented, plots, surveillance camera footage, diagrams, chemical testing. I mean, they're insanely elaborate, right? Like the same thing with people doing UFO abductions. The interesting thing is, their conspiracy theories, if you think about it, are simpler than the actual world. Because part of what a conspiracy theory does is it accounts for all of these unaccountable things. It accounts for strangeness, for random chance, for individual motives. It couldn't have been a lone gunman who killed Kennedy. I mean, whatever it is. I don't know if it was or not. I'm just saying. It's that the most terrifying thing sometimes can be just the truth. I mean, the truth that we already know. That, what human beings are capable of. And the conspiracy sort of solves that. And that kind of tension is there in Oedipus as well. He's looking for the conspiracy, meaning falsifying the Oracle of Delphi, doing all these things, the complicity between the priest and the prince. And it's because in some ways it's a simpler thing than the truth. The truth is mind-bending, meaning Tiresias has already told him the truth. But how can that be? How can I be the murderer of my father, the husband of my mother? How can I be this? How can I be something so monstrous? That's complex. It's not complex in the number of parts. It's complex with the complexity of the human heart, with the human condition. Just infinitely more complex than any conspiracy theory. The conspiracy theories simplify in a strange kind of way. The truth of tragedy can't be simplified. It's meaning it's bottomless. It's like an abyss. So there's now look at 630, 631, and she ends up trying to sort of make Oedipus feel better, realize why there's nothing to fear. One thing she tells him on line 790 is, but Laius, the report goes, was killed by strangers, thieves, at a place where 3 roads meet. Then she tells him something else. She had her son killed, right? My baby no more murdered his father than Laius suffered, as well as feared death at his son's hands, right? And then Oedipus begins to hear something in this, right? But he knows one thing that's wrong. The thing about the child is disturbing. But the taken out, exposed on a hillside, he's beginning to get a sense that's him. But on the other hand, Laius was killed by multiple people. Oedipus knows that the guy he killed, he didn't know who it was. The man he killed, he tried to ride him, force him out of the road. He was alone. He was killed by one man, not by a band of thieves. So that's one. So it's kind of a mixed message. Some good news, some really disturbing news, but the pieces are starting to fall into place. And it's now there is Oedipus begins on 632, 633. She tells Jocasta of this rumor he heard at a party when somebody got drunk and started talking too much, and that Oedipus wasn't really the king's son in Corinth. And so how he went to Delphi, then heard this terrible prophecy: kill your father, marry your mother. And so he fled. And then he reached that very spot where the great king, you said, Laius, met his death. There is now he also tells a little bit about why he killed the king, and this is another thing he's responsible for. It wasn't self-defense. Yes, Laius, being a king, was being a jerk. It's like the presidential motorcade. Everybody gets out of the way. Traffic locks up. But Oedipus responded in pride, being a prince himself, and arrogance and rage. And giving way to his rage, he ends up killing. It's an incident of road rage. He kills an old man for an insult on the road, which is not justifiable in any circumstances, right? Regardless of the whole prophecy thing. So there is culpability in that. When you now 634, toward the end of this, he says, "Wasn't I born for tormentation, for torment? Look me in the eyes. I am abomination. Why wouldn't a man of judgment say? Wouldn't he be right? Some savage power has brought this down upon my head. No, not that, you pure and awesome gods. Never let me see that day." Right? And it's even in spite of this, he refuses to blame the gods, which is good. But part of what he's praising them, but only if they save him from the taint of this scandal, this corruption, this shame. And it's and Jocasta tries to get him to go inside, and does, just like Creon did. Right? Let's take this inside, away from the people. And you get a long choral song, and you have this warning on line 963. Pride breeds the tyrant. And it's now on 636, a messenger comes, and it's a messenger from Corinth announcing that the king has died in Corinth, and they want Oedipus to come back and be king. And there can't be a problem with his return because his father's dead, so he can't kill him, right? If that's his father. There is now there is at the interesting thing is Jocasta realizes this is good news, at least in terms of putting Oedipus's mind at ease temporarily. 637, she says, "What should a man fear? It's all chance. Chance rules our lives. There's nothing about your random fears, strange dreams, strange desires, and everyone struggles with these. They don't mean anything. They're just dreams." And then she counsels him on line 1077. Live, Oedipus, as if there's no tomorrow. Now that counsel is precisely the opposite of what you learn from tragedy. That to live as if there's no tomorrow is also to live as if there's no past, no future, just the present. But our anxiety about the future and what we carry with us from our past is what it is to be human in a lot of ways. So she's counseling oblivion. Don't worry about it. Forget it. Pretend it never was. It's all dreams. It's all smoke. There's only the present. And it means she wants him to remain blind. But he refuses to listen to that counsel. That it's now on 639, the messenger goes on to tell him that Polybus, the king of Corinth, was not actually his father. He's doing this to make him feel better, but of course this is going to be a horrific thing. And he says, how do you know this? And the messenger tells him, I was the one on Mount Cithron who took you from the hands of a shepherd from Thebes and brought you to the palace. So I know who you are. I know where you came from. And it's now on 640, Jocasta redoubles her attempts to stop it. And he says, failed to solve the mystery of my birth, not for all the world. She says, stop, in the name of God. If you love your own life, my suffering is enough. And he says, listen to you no more. I must know it all. I must see the truth at last. Then he demands to see the herdsman, the former shepherd who took the baby Oedipus out, and to find out the truth of it. Let it burst, whatever will, whatever must. Then you start to have, you have the choral response of nymphs and Pan and all the things of nature, being all the things associated with Mount Cithron and shepherds. And they're still kind of evading. They see where they start to feel in their guts where this is going, and it's not good. But like Oedipus, they're still looking for some possible way out. Not oblivion, but some truth which will get them out of it. There is, now, so the shepherd is brought in, identified at bottom 741, and it goes on. And Oedipus then threatens him with torture. So you won't talk willingly on 1266. Then you'll talk with pain, and then so that they're going to torture an old man to make him confess. And of course, the shepherd has made himself scarce because he doesn't want to be anywhere near the capital. He doesn't want to be near Thebes, near the palace, because he knows what he knows, and he knows that it should go to the grave with him. But here it's being, so he finally tells this, that yes, there was this baby. Yes, Jocasta gave it to me. I was supposed to kill it, and I didn't. Instead, I gave it to this man, the messenger from Corinth. And 643 is where you have the moment of recognition, as Aristotle calls it. And when he's, oh God, all come true, all burst to light. I stand revealed at last, cursed in my birth, cursed in my marriage, cursed in the lives I cut down with these hands. And then the chorus answers. You were my great example, you, your life, your destiny, Oedipus, man of misery, I count no man blessed. And then you have the messenger and the leader of the chorus discussing, and the messenger relates what has happened in the palace after this revelation. Jocasta had run in, Oedipus had run in after her, and he renounces the obscene things. That obscene literally means things that take place off stage. Any things of extreme fear, extreme terror, extreme violence weren't shown on the stage. They were obscene. And so, and it's funny, we tend to, our meaning of obscene is very different, and we tend to have no limit to obscenity, especially extreme suffering. And we portray it on nightly news. And it's our cable channels, they thrive on it. But the Greeks, as excessive as they could be in so many ways, they had a sense of propriety in regard to the stage. Not in terms of, not that they were prudish, but in terms of the most inward kind of human suffering, acts of actual death, whatever, those things would happen off stage and then be related on stage. So the messenger tells them what has happened, right? That she had hung herself, and there's and Oedipus comes in. He comes in and he seizes the brooch from out of her garments and plunges them into his eyes to blind himself. So there we saw a woman hanging by the neck, cradled high in a woven noose. When he saw her, he rips off her brooches, long gold pins, holding her ropes and lifting them high, looking straight up into the points. He digs them into the sockets of his eyes. His eyes. You'll see no more the pain I suffered, all the pain I caused. And it's then the chorus begins to relate more to the terror to the others. And then I am agony is on 647, line 1043. The agony, I am agony. Where am I going? My destiny, my dark power, what a leap you made. And he has this dialogue with the chorus. Then the interesting thing is when they repeated these things, they say these things were dark, but they were done with a will. Then Oedipus at the bottom of or toward the end of 647 says, Apollo, friends, Apollo, he ordained my agonies, these my pains on pains, but the hand that struck my eyes was mine alone, no one else. I did it all myself. Now this is terrible, but the interesting thing here is one of the lessons of tragedy is you can't control your fate. What you can control is your response to it. And the nobility of the tragic protagonist comes not from altering his or her fate, but from accepting it and so transforming its meaning. We've all struggled with that in our own lives. We see it more clearly when you see friends or family members go through it, where there are inevitable, terrible things, but there's a big difference. It's like dying of cancer, to choose a totally natural example. That it's a horrible thing, but it's very different when you see people respond to it in different ways. And some can respond to it with the greatest kind of nobility, and how that's even possible. It's not that they get better, it's not that they beat it. There can be a nobility even in the acceptance of it. Not that they don't resign themselves to it in despair, although they're tempted by that, give way to it at times, but they're able to rise above it in a strange kind of way. That to some extent, that's one of the great things of human life, and it's not always possible. We all are different people, we face things in different ways and different kinds of things. But part of what tragedy gives you is a protagonist facing a fate, a terrible fate he or she can't change, and moving toward acceptance of that, embracing it, and so rising above it in a strange kind of way. They become oddly godlike, even when they are most victimized by the gods. There is now when you end up on 648, you have more things. I am misery, all these things, and it's then they advise him to put his request to Creon. Creon will grant him, and that Oedipus requests to be driven out of the land at once in his blind, disgraced state. Creon will care for his children, even though, especially his daughters, who are now the children of incest, marked forever, unsuitable for any marriage. And his greatest grief is what he has done to his children. And that's where this goes. And Creon is there. He basically tells Oedipus it's time to end this, to be quiet, to go inside, out of human sight, and then eventually out of the city. Now, there's if you look at the final words of the chorus, what you get is a summation of the lesson of tragedy. People of Thebes, my countrymen, look on Oedipus. He solved the famous riddle with his brilliance. He rose to power, a man beyond all power. Who could behold his greatness without envy? Now what a black sea of terror has overwhelmed him. Now as we keep our watch and wait the final day, count no man happy till he dies, free of pain at last. And that is the lesson of tragedy. That And that only in death are we freed from pain. We're freed from the mystery of suffering. And it's they don't have the same sense of redemption that's before Christ. They're not Jews of the Old Covenant. They're ancient pagans, staring into the mystery of human life and suffering and trying to make sense of it. And they don't explain it away. What they do is give it a form in which it can be enacted and given a kind of meaning, the hope of a certain kind of redemption. And the interesting thing is, a lot of later Christian thinking, a lot of later Christian art, doesn't forget the lesson of that sort of primordial pagan tragedy or the pagan epic, that it's still in the background. Because it's terrible to think of. It doesn't do you much good when people just sort of give you some consoling Christian response in the middle of suffering, but it's true. And even if you don't want to hear it, or they don't say it right, because Lord knows it's hard to say, right, when you're talking to someone who's just lost a child or something terrible. But there is the deepest possible hope in that. But somehow it helps to sort of remember that, to some extent, someone in the middle of it still suffers it as Oedipus does, as others do. They still suffer as those who have no hope, because it seems like it's distant. It seems like they're beyond it. It seems like it's too overwhelming. So in an interesting way, in some ways, in ways we encounter in our own lives, it can help you, oddly enough, to recover the deepest significance of the Christian hope by not going to it too early, if that makes sense. Meaning that you sort of look into the abyss and then you see the God who saves you in that abyss, from the floor of hell itself. And it's that doesn't, and that in some ways enhances it. It allows us to recover what the gospel is, how astoundingly magnificent this is, how unworthy of it we are. And it's one of the many reasons to read the pagan authors, because there's a truth there. There's a terrible truth. The main truth is what we are as human beings, what our condition is. And it's so we'll go from that and we'll jump from Oedipus. So Oedipus will only be one long session, and we'll. I want you to go ahead and pick out your version of Hamlet, either the Zeffirelli Mel Gibson one or the Branagh one, and watch that. And we will, but in the videos we'll talk through some of the script, some of the play itself, and we're jumping over the medieval, because there is no medieval tragedy. That in the medieval, it's always comedy. You face terrible things in the Inferno, but we know how the story ends. You're in a cosmos where God is firmly in control, and all things are ultimately redeemed through the work of His Son, except those who refuse. And it's a grand comic vision for all of its terrors. But by the time you get to the early modern, tragedy resurfaces with a vengeance, and with the greatest of all playwrights, Shakespeare himself. So we will, in light of that, we'll look at Shakespeare and Hamlet, a play a lot of us are familiar with, but it is one of his greatest plays. And it's one of those things that when you read it later in life, it grows, it gets better. It's not like reading it in high school. It's a different thing. And when you read it at 30 or at 40, or, well, I'm not quite to 50 yet, but if you read it at 60, it takes on added dimension. And it's probably not the greatest of his plays, but it's one of the greatest. And it's so take another look at it, enjoy it first before reading any of it. Enjoy it, watching it. So that's your main thing for this coming week, is watch Hamlet, and watch it before you watch the videos where we're talking about it. Okay? All right. See you.